Imagine a battle where one side loses over 50,000 men in a single afternoon. A casualty count so catastrophic it changes the course of history forever. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an annihilation, a tactical masterpiece that still defines military genius 2,000 years later. But how could a seemingly weaker force, led by a Carthaginian outsider, surround and utterly crush the most formidable army in the Mediterranean world? This is the story of Cannae, the day the Roman Republic stood on the brink of extinction. Section Breakdown: The Shadow of Trebia and Trasimene, setting the stage. The Shadow of Trebia and Trasimene, setting the stage for annihilation. Before you can truly appreciate the terrifying perfection of Cannae, you must first understand the psychological warfare that preceded it. The year is 218 BC. Rome, the burgeoning power of the Mediterranean, believes itself invincible. But across the Alps rides a nightmare on horseback, Hannibal Barca. This man swore an oath of eternal enmity to Rome as a child, and he was now making good on that terrifying promise. Hannibal's arrival in Italy was met, not with effective resistance, but with shock, awe, and brutal defeat. Think of Trebia, his first major victory. Rome sent 2 consular armies, totaling nearly 40,000 men, confident they could swat away this Carthaginian trespasser. But Hannibal didn't fight fair. He didn't follow the Roman rulebook, using frozen rivers, hidden ambushes, and his superior Numidian cavalry. He decimated the Roman forces. It was a humiliating rout, but Rome is stubborn. They regrouped, rearmed, and sent a new, larger force. Then came Lake Trasimene. This was not a battle. It was a slaughter facilitated by nature itself. Hannibal marched his entire army along the lake's edge, using the morning mist as his cloak. The Romans, led by the impetuous consul Gaius Flaminius, marched blindly into a funnel-shaped death trap. As the mist lifted, the Romans found themselves pinned between the lake and the Carthaginian phalanxes on the hills. They were unable to form up, unable to fight, and were simply butchered. Thousands drowned trying to escape. In just 2 years, Hannibal had destroyed 70,000 Roman soldiers and shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. Now, Rome was truly afraid. The fields of Italy were soaked in the blood of its best men. Why is this important? Because Trebia and Trasimene didn't just kill soldiers. The Roman response: pride, politics, and the march of the 80,000. The Roman Senate faced a dilemma. Either adopt the cautious, delaying tactics of the dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus, a strategy nicknamed Conctator, the delayer, or confront Hannibal directly. Fabius's strategy was to refuse direct battle, harass Carthaginian foragers, and starve Hannibal out. It was working, but it was unpopular. It felt cowardly. It felt unmanned. How could the mighty republic endure such a humiliation on its own soil? The Roman people and their politicians craved a decisive victory, a quick, glorious end to the war that would restore their honor. So, in 216 BC, they elected 2 new consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Paulus was the more experienced, cautious commander, inclined to listen to Fabius. Varro, however, was aggressive, impetuous, and itching for a fight. Critically, these 2 men were given joint command, meaning they would alternate control of the army on a daily basis, a recipe for strategic disaster born of political compromise. They didn't just assemble an army, they assembled a colossus. Rome levied an unprecedented force, 8 full legions, plus an equal number of allied troops, swelling their total numbers to somewhere between 80,000 and 86,000 men. It was the largest army Rome had ever put into the field. Their plan was simple, rooted in the conventional wisdom of the time. Use sheer, overwhelming numbers, mass the infantry in the center, and simply push Hannibal's inferior force aside. They marched south to Apulia, near the small town of Cannae. The Romans, buoyed by their numbers, felt invincible. Their combined force utterly dwarfed Hannibal's own army, which numbered around 50,000 men, a mix of Gauls, Spaniards, and Africans. The difference in quality and size was immense. Yet the political necessity of a victory had blinded Hannibal's strategy, deception, and the perfect battlefield. Hannibal was not merely waiting for the Romans, he was curating his destruction. Unlike the Romans, who were driven by political pride, Hannibal was driven by cold, calculating strategy. He meticulously chose the battleground, a wide, flat plain near the town of Cannae on the Aufidus River, seemingly counterintuitive choice for an outnumbered army. Why a flat, open field? Because Hannibal needed space for his most potent weapon, his superior cavalry. The Roman cavalry was outnumbered and outmatched by Hannibal's Spanish and Numidian horsemen. On the flanks, where the cavalry wings would engage, a flat plain ensured the Roman horses could underuse terrain to their advantage and would be swept away quickly, clearing the way for the decisive encirclement. More subtly, Hannibal used environmental factors to his advantage. The armies faced east and west. Hannibal positioned his troops facing east, ensuring the Romans would have the early morning sun in their eyes, slightly hindering their visibility and compounding their anxiety. Even more critical was the wind. The area near Cannae is often swept by a southerly wind, which Hannibal utilized to blow dust and sand directly into the faces of the Roman legions as they advanced. Imagine trying to fight, blinded and choking, against a relentless enemy. But the most audacious part of his strategy was the deliberate deployment of his infantry. Knowing the Roman tendency to mass their forces for a single, overwhelming push in the center, Hannibal decided to give them exactly what they wanted. He deployed his best troops, the seasoned African veterans, on the flanks, hidden or held back. In the center, he placed his most unreliable troops, the newly recruited Gauls and Iberians, in a crescent formation that bowed outwards toward the Romans. This formation was an invitation, a deadly deception. The outward bowing line, the crescent formation, the tactical genius of the weaker center. This is where the genius of Hannibal's design truly shines. Shifting from positioning to active manipulation, the Roman army, led by Varro on this fatal day, deployed in their customary deep columns. They packed their 80,000 men into a tightly concentrated formation, maximizing their weight and frontal impact, the tactical equivalent of a massive battering ram designed to punch a hole through any line. Hannibal's response was the antithesis of Roman strength, elasticity. His central line, made up primarily of the less disciplined but fiercely loyal Gauls and Iberians, was deployed in that convex crescent, bowing toward the Roman legions. Crucially, this crescent was deployed in shallow depth, but was flanked on either side by the veteran African infantry, who were held back, deployed in a straight line, and facing inward at a slight angle. Varro, seeing this bulging, visibly weaker center, took the bait instantly. He ordered the legions forward, confident that the sheer weight of 80,000 Romans charging would shatter the Carthaginian line. And initially, it worked exactly as the Romans expected. The Gauls and Iberians absorbed the massive shock of the Roman advance and began to give ground immediately. The crescent began to bend inward, reversing its shape and becoming concave. This retreat was not a rout. It was a calculated withdrawal, orchestrated by Hannibal himself, who was positioned right in the middle of his retreating men. By slowly and deliberately pulling the center backward, Hannibal achieved three critical things. First, he lured the dense Roman legions deeper and deeper into a confined space, causing the Roman formation to become even more tightly compressed and disordered. Their forward momentum was now focused entirely on the seemingly retreating center. Second, he ensured that the Roman flanks, already pressed by the sheer number of their own troops, became totally disconnected from the main action, funneling them into a bottleneck where their numbers were actually a hindrance. Third, and most importantly, the backward curve, the Roman trap, momentum, pressure, and the fatal encirclement. As the Roman center drove Hannibal's Gauls and Iberians back, the entire Roman army began to surge forward, their formations compressing even further. The momentum was intoxicating. They thought they were winning. They had done what they were trained to do, break the enemy line. But the cost of this success was disorder and tunnel vision. The sheer density of the Roman troops meant deep or moment that soldiers on the outside of the column could barely see what was happening, and none could maneuver. The troops had lost all tactical flexibility. They were simply a massive, muscle-bound mass pushing into a shrinking space. Their strength had become their prison. This moment was the signal for Hannibal to spring the main trap. As the Carthaginian center reached its deepest point of retreat, the moment when the Roman front lines were exhausted, and their rear lines were still pushing them forward, the two wings of African veteran infantry that had been waiting patiently on the flanks finally came alive. These troops, famous for their discipline and equipped with captured Roman armor, suddenly turned inward and marched directly into the exposed, disorganized flanks of the now bottlenecked Roman infantry. Imagine the shock. One moment you are pushing forward, victorious. The next, You are being attacked violently from the side by fresh, elite troops you never even saw moving. This flanking maneuver simultaneously halted the Roman advance and sealed off the sides of the column. But the final, fatal blow came from the cavalry. In the opening hours of the battle, Hannibal's superior cavalry had utterly routed their Roman and allied counterparts on both wings. Hannibal's general, Hasdrubal, having finished off the Roman cavalry, didn't pursue them. Instead, with a brilliant tactical move, he rode his combined force around the entire Roman army's rear and crashed into the unexpected. The anatomy of annihilation, why Cannae became a massacre. Once the trap was sprung, the battle ceased to be a tactical engagement and became an industrial-scale slaughter. The Roman legions, compressed into a dense, immobile mass, immediately faced a problem no military force can overcome: complete loss of effective action. With Hannibal's forces pressing inward from all sides, the retreating center, the two African veteran flanks, and the cavalry in the rear, the Roman soldiers had no room to swing their weapons, no ability to maneuver, and no space to even reform their ranks. The soldiers on the outer perimeter were fighting desperately, but the sheer weight of the men behind them pushed them relentlessly onto the Carthaginian spears. The soldiers in the center were effectively trapped. They were being crushed to death by their comrades before an enemy weapon even reached them. Think of it, the Roman density, which was meant to deliver crushing force, now turned their army into a single massive, vulnerable target. Every single missile, every javelin, every thrust of a sword thrown by the Carthaginians was guaranteed to hit a target. They were not fighting individual soldiers, they were carving away at a block of humanity. The Carthaginian soldiers, by contrast, were fresh, disciplined, and had room to maneuver. The African veterans, the anchor of the whole operation, simply and systematically began to cut the Roman mass down, starting with the outer layers. The Gauls and Iberians, having been refreshed and supported, now pressed forward again. The carnage was horrific. The massacre lasted for hours. The Romans couldn't surrender effectively, as there was no front to face. They were simply being butchered where they stood. The consuls themselves were caught in the chaos. Paulus, the cautious commander, was killed fighting bravely. Varro, the impetuous one, managed to escape the encirclement, only to face the eternal shame of having led the largest army in Roman history to its complete destruction. By the time the sun began to set, the field of Cannae was covered. Accounts claimed the Carthaginian the aftermath, terror, transformation, and the legacy of the perfect battle. The news that trickled back to Rome was not just of defeat, but of utter, unimaginable catastrophe. Rome, a city built on military pride and conquest, was plunged into a state of absolute terror. Imagine the scene. Almost every family in Rome lost a father, a son, or a brother. The casualties were so high that the Senate immediately banned public mourning, fearing that the collective wailing would incite a panic or a revolt. Hannibal, standing victorious on the plain of Cannae, famously sent a massive amount of gold signet rings taken from the fingers of fallen Roman knights and senators back to Carthage as proof of his victory, reportedly filling several large baskets. Rome was, by all logical accounts, finished. Hannibal controlled the south of Italy. His victory was absolute, and the psychological impact on the Italian allies was immediate, with many cities and regions defecting from Roman allegiance. Why didn't Hannibal march on Rome immediately? That remains one of history's great military what-ifs. His pragmatic general Mahabil allegedly told him, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one," whether due to lack of siege equipment, fear of a protracted city battle, or simply believing the Republic would immediately collapse. Hannibal hesitated, but this hesitation gave Rome the chance to transform. Cannae did not destroy the Republic. Ironically, it forged its resilience. The Senate, depleted of its best men, now showed iron resolve. They immediately took emergency measures. They ransomed not only prisoners, but even slaves to fill the gaps in the legions. They threw political squabbles aside and universally embraced the frustrating but necessary delaying strategy of Fabius Maximus. They refused to negotiate with Hannibal, declaring any thought of surrender unrepentant. The impact of Cannae echoed for millennia. It became the definitive case study of tactical excellence. The double envelopment, or pincer movement, as perfected by Hannibal that day, is still taught in every major military academy. Even as late as World War I, commanders like Schlieffen consciously modeled battle plans on Hannibal's model. To this day, military strategists use the phrase Cannae-style annihilation, and so we are left with the chilling final image of Cannae, a field of death, a tactical instruction manual written in blood, and a historical turning point. Hannibal achieved the single most destructive day in Roman military history, a feat never truly repeated. He created the perfect battle, a tactical maneuver so flawless that it became the benchmark for military genius across 20 centuries. The phrase Hannibal ad portas, Hannibal is at the gates, became the Roman byword for ultimate terror and existential threat. Yet, Rome did not fall. In the end, Cannae taught the Romans the hardest lesson of all, that sheer force and political arrogance are no match for strategic brilliance. It forced them to abandon their hubris, innovate their tactics, and commit to the long, grinding war that would eventually see Hannibal, despite his victories, defeated not by a single battle, but by a relentless strategy of attrition. Cannae was the zenith of Hannibal's career and the nadir of Rome's fortune. He remains a timeless, powerful reminder that in warfare, the quality of the commander and the cunning of the plan